Hello, and welcome to another vlog. This week's theme is physiotherapy. As always, I will be releasing a video on Thursday, in which I talk more about this week's topic, so be sure to subscribe if you want to see that video. Today, there's two things I want to talk about. First, I want to talk about my personal experience with physiotherapy, so that is the types of physiotherapy that I've undergone over the years. And I'd also like to talk about some of the basic principles of physiotherapy. So, let's jump right into it. Now, you may remember me saying in some of the episodes where I talked about muscular dystrophy that one of the main treatments for MD is physiotherapy. So, unsurprisingly, over the years, I've seen a lot of physiotherapists who have helped to manage the symptoms that I have. And they've done that in a lot of different ways. So I want to talk about some of the different ways in which physiotherapists have helped me over the years, starting when I was a child and then working my way up to present day. So for the most part, there's two main types of physiotherapy um, that I received in the form of stretches and exercises. And I realize that those two things are very similar, but I make the distinction just so that things aren't quite as confusing. And these stretches and exercises had two main purposes. The first was to kind of test and gauge my existing abilities, and the second was to slow down the progression of my muscular dystrophy, which, as you probably know, is a progressive condition. Um, so when I was a kid, I did a lot of physiotherapy, and these exercises took on a lot of different forms. Sometimes my physiotherapist would get me to walk down the hall or climb upstairs to kind of gauge my abilities in those areas, see how well I could walk and how well I could climb upstairs. Because as Duchenne progresses, your ability to do those things tends to decrease as well. Um, right, so that was just a way of my physiotherapist kind of seeing how much the disorder had progressed so far and seeing what needed to be done to counteract that. And there were other um, kinds of exercises like that as well. For example, sometimes the physiotherapist would get me to squeeze their hand or cut out a circle, a paper circle, and these kinds of exercises were obviously meant to test my strength and dexterity. And then I also got a lot of exercises. These mainly took the form of stretches, range of motion exercises. So these were basically stretches that they performed to kind of slow down the, I guess you'd call it the atrophy of the tendons and things like that, to kind of maintain my ability to move my arms and legs as much as possible. So those were range of motion exercises. Um, they performed most of them on my legs, where they, you know, bend and stretch my legs in different ways to kind of stretch the tendons. And my father had to do a lot of the stretches with me at night, which I absolutely hated. And I also had to wear a special orthotic called moon boots at night, which you may remember me talking about in the episode on orthotics. Um, and this continued for quite a few years when I was a kid. And a lot of times my physiotherapist would kind of disguise these exercises as almost like fun and games. I mean, in hindsight, obviously, there was more to them than just having fun. There was a purpose to them. But, you know, when I was a kid, I didn't quite fully understand why I had to get that physiotherapy. Now, as I got older, we did continue to do the stretches with me, but the physiotherapy that I got kind of evolved with my changing needs. So when I was an older kid and when I was a teenager, we still did some of the stretches, but we also did some other exercises as well. So for example, when I started using a wheelchair full time around age 11 or 12, they'd get me to walk using the bars. And they also continued doing stretches. But once I became a teenager, they did the stretches a lot less and focused more on other areas of physical need. For example, my respiratory health. So when I was a teenager, the uh, physiotherapist taught me how to do something called breath stacking, which is a special kind of breathing exercise that people with respiratory failure use to try and fill up their lungs. And so that was something that I did a lot when I was a teenager. And then that led into other treatments such as the ambu bag and the cough assist, which are things that I will talk about in future episodes. Um, right, and at this point in time, I don't really get the stretches anymore because as a 25-year-old with Duchenne muscular dystrophy, there's not a lot of benefit to them anymore. Um, there is some benefit. For example, doing those stretches can uh, prevent my legs from getting sore, which does sometimes happen, but there's not really a lot that those stretches can do in terms of improving my range of motion. One of the other types of physiotherapy that I also got when I was a teenager was massage therapy. Um, and the purpose of that was to kind of loosen up some of my muscles, which would make it a little bit easier for me to move around. And I will say that that did help a lot. So that's just kind of a brief overview of the kinds of physiotherapy that I received. One note that I want to make is that although most people with Duchenne muscular dystrophy and other types of muscular dystrophy do get a lot of these same types of physiotherapy, it does vary from person to person based on their specific needs, and this applies to um, everyone with any type of condition getting physiotherapy. Just because two people have the same physical health condition doesn't mean that they're going to be receiving the same types of physiotherapy. It varies depending on someone's exact diagnosis and their specific needs. So this brings me to the next thing that I want to talk about, which is the 4 basic principles of physiotherapy. Um, so from the research that I've done, it's become very clear to me that there's 4 main purposes to physiotherapy. So I'm going to quickly go over them. So these 4 basic principles are diagnosis, treatment, rehabilitation, and prevention. So I'll just go over each of them a little bit. So diagnosis refers to the identification of existing health conditions. So in the case of physiotherapy, it's looking at the individual's physical symptoms and determining which diagnosis best fits those symptoms. Then there's treatment, which basically refers to managing health conditions. So that's looking at all the different types of physiotherapy and determining which kinds of physiotherapy are going to best benefit that individual based on their specific diagnosis. And there's a lot of different types. There's the exercises, there's the massage therapy, there's hot and cold therapy, acupuncture, um, a whole bunch of things like that. Many different types of physiotherapy, which you see in Thursday's video. Um, and different types of physiotherapy benefit people with different diagnoses. Um, the third principle is rehabilitation. So rehabilitation refers to the process of helping someone restore their functionality and independence. So in terms of physiotherapy, that would be working with someone with a physical disability or serious injury and helping them to regain the skills that they may have lost and find new ways to do things that they may not be able to do as easily. And then the last principle is prevention. So as the name suggests, prevention basically means preventing other health conditions from developing, right? So physiotherapy does this. A lot of the exercises and whatnot that people receive from a physiotherapist, oftentimes they're not meant to treat an existing health condition, but rather to prevent other similar health conditions from developing. So, for example, with someone with muscular dystrophy, there's a lot of other symptoms associated with muscular dystrophy that the physiotherapists want to prevent developing. So they'll execute some of those exercises and other physio um, principles to kind of help prevent that, and to keep someone with Duchenne muscular dystrophy, for example, walking for as long as possible. Um, so that's just a very brief overview of physiotherapy. Like I said, watch Thursday's video if you want to learn a bit more about this week's topic. If you enjoyed this week's video and you want to see more of them, please subscribe, and also be sure to like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter. Anyway, thanks for watching, and see you on Thursday.